Bible says the message of the cross is
foolishness.
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 Foolishness to those that are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Well, guys, hope you are all doing amazing, having an amazing day, and that your faith is being encouraged. And honestly, I cannot believe we already have 14 episodes under the belt. And it's with that in mind that I would like to welcome you all to episode 15 of none other than The Pastor's Perspective with myself, Don Stewart, and... Wait a minute. I had to do that. I couldn't intro this and say it was the Foolishness podcast. Guys, I am kidding because, of course, I'm sitting here with my good friend. These guys are cracking up over there. You thought I was joking, huh? I'm sitting here with the host of The Real Pastor's Perspective, better known for his current role as lead pastor over Calvary Chapel, Costa, Mesa, Pastor Brian Brodersen. How are we doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and it's really great to be with you.
Amen.
Yeah, I've been watching, kind of from a distance, your podcast here, and, kind of secretly wishing I could be on it. And then you invited me. So I'm really glad to be here.
Amen.
I'm probably your oldest guest so far, right?
Well, you're definitely the first Brian. So there's two Brians here. Okay. So it's like double the anointing. But I don't know. 23, is that the oldest guest? Or no, you're rocking the gray with the black glasses goods and the denim jacket. So
yeah.
I think that cuts it in half. But even in this intro, I think it's pretty cool because obviously you asking me even earlier, how's Josh Harmony doing, our buddy?
Yeah.
And he was going to be on this tonight, and we were going to have him play this kind of live show, talk through his music, do the rest. And I go, okay, who is local that's around that might be free? Yeah. And a few weeks ago you said, hey, I'm free at some time. I'll try and make a...
You're right, yeah.
So I messaged you through Instagram, and you get back to me like you're asking your mother, probably your wife, right?
Yeah.
I'll let you know if I'm free. And then within a few hours, like a couple of fists and a thumb.
Yeah.
And so here we are. So thank you for taking time out of your busy life.
No, it's great to be here. But I did seriously have to walk through, okay, what am I doing and when am I doing it? And do Thursday. Yeah, okay. I actually have a free, and I told Cheryl, that you had asked me to do it. And she said, oh, you should go do that for sure. So.
And we'll have to have Cheryl, thank you.
Yeah.
But we'll have to have you guys on and do some kind of marriage thing or something for the women. Because I've been getting a lot of requests for women, and I said, hey, it just happens that right now a lot of men are within reach who are on here, but I do want to give you the proper intro. So Pastor Brian, head over Calvary Chapel, the ministry in Costa Mesa, really, which is a global movement, authored many books, and I'm sure you don't want me to go on about this stuff, but it's relevant people to know. You're always traveling, and most importantly, really a son of God, a husband, a father, a grandfather. And if I'm being honest, I think you are an American that actually wanted to be English, right? Where I'm the English guy who wants to be American, or did that boat sail?
Well, it's interesting. I was in Argentina a few weeks ago, and I was thinking about my great-great-grandfather who left Liverpool.
Really?
Yes, and he sailed to Argentina. But he didn't stay in Argentina. Instead, he came to California, and he settled what's known as the Conejo Valley.
Wow.
So if you go up the 101 nowadays, and you'll pass a historical monument there. It's the Stagecoach Inn. Mm-hmm. My great-great-grandfather, Cecil Haig, from Liverpool, he founded...
He's from Liverpool. Born in Liverpool.
Yeah, I never told you that.
That's crazy.
He is.
Because, we've hung out so much. Enough. I don't even know if we remember where we first met, but it's obviously... you guys are within 20 minutes of where we are. I'm always around the same people. Right. It's Calvary. It's all the churches now. But he was born in Liverpool?
He was born in Liverpool. Yeah.
Wow. And Cecil?
Cecil Haig, yeah.
I think that's Lance Mountain's son's name is Cecil.
Is that right?
Lance Jr. Because you don't hear, you get Cecil. People say it, but it is Cecil.
Yeah, it's Cecil, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, and then of course, yes, I love Britain, and, I lived in London for some years. And I go back several times a year.
And you've sent a lot of pastors there, a lot of ministries.
Yeah, and we do a festival, and you've been part of that festival with the Creation Fest in Cornwall.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
10 days of what is it, like 10 to 15, 20,000 people showing up from...
Yeah, it's about 10 to 15,000 these days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which is unheard of, because England doesn't... growing up in Liverpool, as I've said many times, I never heard the gospel.
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that Calvary is sending such people over, your dad's from there, so... And he settled where up north
up in Ventura County.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
have you Thousand Oaks? You heard of that?
Of course.
Newberry Park.
I mean, a lot of skating up there, stuff like that.
Yeah, so Newberry Park was actually the place where the Stagecoach Inn is. Yeah.
So you, for jumping into this, I know you're probably already on the radio today on the Real Pastor Perspective, right?
I was. Yeah.
So it's funny to be getting interviewed. We've already hung out for an hour and had every kind of conversation, but I would say we're going to jump into a bit later, the Jesus movement and how revival even looks, what Calvary Global is doing today. And I want to ask, as a pastor, how do you raise up your kids and the rest? But I guess for some people who may not know, what was the coming to faith, regeneration, salvation moment for you? I'm always sharing my story because of the skate platform. Yeah. But for you, how did that transition?
Well, we are in Huntington Beach. And so I grew up in Huntington Beach, and I grew up, in part of the surf culture here. That was kind of just my whole life. Went to Huntington Beach High School. And, it was just, how it was. I mean, it still is that way to some degree, but it was pretty much sex, drugs, rock and roll, and surfing. Yeah. And that was my life. And that's what I did, pretty much 24/7, just lived to surf, basically. Wow. And
I didn't know this. So dad's from Liverpool, born in Huntington. I mean, this is actually the story.
No, I know. I was actually born up north, up in the Ventura County. Okay. And then my family progressively moved from Ventura County to LA County, then to Orange County. So to Huntington Beach here. So anyway, in my teens and 20s, very early 20s, just partying, just doing all the crazy stuff, in and out of trouble, in and out of jail, surfing for some of the local guys, running some of the surf shops, doing all that kind of stuff. But just a wreck, and just internally just sensing, man, there has got to be something more to life than I'm just living the party scene. I was into music and but it was all just so empty. Yeah. And so when I was, actually the whole Jesus thing that we know today, the Jesus movement, this is kind of going on all around me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this, so go right into it.
Yeah, it was kind of going on all around me, and I was doing my best to avoid it. I was doing my best to stay away from the Jesus freaks, and every time I saw them, I'd like, man, I got to go the other way. There's those freaks. And so that was kind of where I was at. And when I was 19, I think it was 19 for the first time, I went to Calvary Chapel, actually. And
in Costa Mesa, in the same location.
Yeah, in the same location. The sanctuary had just recently been built, and I went there. And basically, I was going there because I heard there were a bunch of really good-looking girls there,
which is why a lot of people actually go to youth group or whatever.
I mean, that was the big attraction, So I went. I got a little bit of exposure, but I just thought, I was born and raised in Roman Catholicism. I got the Catholic Church. It's 2,000 years old. I got the Pope. I don't need, what is this stuff? Who are these people? What are they? And they would, back when the tent was up, people would say, hey, you got to go to the tent. I'm like, are you crazy? I'm not going to a tent. I got a great church right down the street. If I want to go to church, I'll go to a real church building. Was it about to go to any, to me, it just smacked of a cult, And so, but to make a long story short, in my, so early 20s, just really got to a place where everything had, just turned up empty, you know, and I think that whole, if anyone thirsts, let them come to me and drink, man, that's where I was at. I was just really, really thirsty. All the partying, all the relationships, all the surfing, all the music, we were going back and forth to Hollywood and all this stuff with my friends. And there just came a point where I thought, man, there's got to be more to life than this.
By the age of 19, you already hit. Yeah. Because we are for people that might not realize, I'd never really heard of Huntington Beach coming from Liverpool. You hear of LA, maybe San Diego, but Huntington, it's this beautiful little surf town. And I mean, the worst thing you'll see is maybe some petty theft, an occasional fight, and a bunch of stoners. But really, it's like you're spoiled. It's surfing, it's the beach. And the sad thing is, go to high school and surf, get into a band maybe, and then people start drinking stoned, and suddenly now it's like speed, meth, dead. So
Yeah.
You didn't go that far, obviously.
No,
but
I didn't, but some of my best friends did. And some of my best friends that I grew up surfing with, some of the best surfers in the world at the time, end up dying of drug overdoses at very young ages.
Wow.
And yeah, the Lord, spared me from that. So 19, I really, started having a stirring, like, man, there's got to be more to life.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was 22 that I finally really made the connection with the Lord. I kind of danced around a little bit. I'd kind of pop into the Calvary and check that out. And then I'd go to the Catholic Church and check that out. And in the meantime, I was living with a girl and partying and doing every other crazy thing, But there just came a moment where the Lord just met me and challenged me. And I knew that I needed to... I didn't even know like the terminology about being born again.
We generally don't.
But somebody asked me if I was born again, and it was like a knife just pierced my heart. It was like, I don't know, but I just knew intuitively that's what I need, because in a sense I was kind of trying to be. Funny enough, I was trying to be a Christian in my own strength. My friends, we got a mellow club. We're going to be nice to our girlfriends. We're not going to beat up people. We're going to, and all of this stuff. And, that only lasted for, a couple of weeks. And then we were right back doing the same thing again. So I sensed that there had to be something. I couldn't be good. I was trying to be good, and I couldn't.
Well, I've always heard, and I think it was even John MacArthur who really focuses on it. When you're witnessing the Catholics, focus on if you're born again, John 3, because you can have all the jewels and the billions and the property and all the rest of it, what just happened with Notre Dame, but it's really, are you born again? Yeah. And so I didn't understand the terminology. People might be listening who don't have an idea what some of these terms mean, but you were beginning to see. And so you touched on the Jesus movement. You came in as that was going on. What actually happened then?
Yeah. And I came in kind of in, a little bit later, because I came in the mid 70s.
Okay.
Is when I came in, and then really came in the late 70s.
Yeah.
But so I started, kind of, going back and forth in and out a little bit around, 76. And, but like I said, being here, growing up here down at the beach, and there was a ton of, just hippies everywhere. And, Jesus
came down from San Francisco and that was happening.
That whole thing. They were everywhere. And literally they were called Jesus freaks. And I called them Jesus freaks because they were freaks.
And it seemed like they were going around witnessing, or
they
just
were.
Being like...
That's everything they were doing. And, this is how weird I was in my head. I actually thought it was unfortunate that they were hippies, because I didn't like hippies, but I thought the Jesus thing was okay. But I was so stupid, I thought you had to become a hippie in order to be for Jesus, so I just opted out.
So you were like, I'm not good. Was your hair long though?
Yeah, my hair was long.
Greg Laurie's was definitely long, right?
But my hair was surfer hair. It wasn't hippie hair.
It was more blonde,
It was blonde, and it wasn't, shoulder length. And it was definitely not a hippie. I definitely was a surfer. And so, just in your youthful stupidity, I for some reason, I didn't think you could be one or the other. I thought you had to kind of be both.
And that's true. You associate with what you see.
Yeah.
So this is going on. And so Calvary, I guess, to this day, the Jesus movement, because it is one of those things when you see these revivals and these ideas, God got a hold. Pastor Chuck planted the church. Obviously, different people got involved. They began to start sharing, and the Spirit of God, just began to move in a different way.
Really, as I look back on it now, and as, all people have researched it and written books about it, it's just an absolute move of God.
Yeah.
You can't really
it was
humanly...
nothing intentional.
No, you can't even point to a person and say, oh, it was this person who did it. There were obviously human players in the whole thing, but it was something extraordinary. I'll just give you an example. So I get saved finally. I get to a point where I, just cry out to the Lord, and I realize I need to be born again. And it's me and a friend of mine, we get saved simultaneously. We start evangelizing our friends, and within 6 months, we led 50 of our friends to Christ. And we were in a little apartment here in Huntington Beach, having worship services all night long.
Yeah.
We would pray and worship all night, and then at 6 o'clock, everybody would go home, get ready, and go to work.
Well, this is, even what you're saying is great, because, I know you guys had maybe talked about doing a feature film on it and helping people understand, and not that you're chasing that whatever happened there, because I know it might have even been Joel or someone, or it was someone down south said, I was part of the Jesus movement. And then they said, one of the pastors said, hey, but Jesus is still moving, right?
That's right.
But here's the reality is this revival, whether you talk about the Great Awakening or the second one or Evan Roberts or the Welsh Revival, what even would you, in your wisdom and knowledge all these years, I'm probably around the world with 60, 70%. Most of the churches I'm going to are Calvary chapels.
Yeah.
So I've had I'm sitting with a pastor like yourself at dinner or the family for 3 days, and I'm hearing all these stories of the Jesus movement. What would you even say today? I was thinking of this recently. If there was a true revival, what would it even look like? Is it that 500,000 people all through social media got together and it was the biggest event, so that's a revival?
Yeah.
Or what was it? Is it? Because...
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I don't think it's entirely stopped. I think it's definitely changed and it's slowed down in some ways, but it's still happening in some certain ways.
You mean
and
the Jesus movement from what?
Yeah, like just that revival, that outpouring of the Spirit. So many things today. I listen to people talk sometimes, and they're talking about different methods and church growth ideas and things like that. And I think, that's all fine, but all of this really stems back to what God did. He intervened and he did something that was unexplainable in human terms, and he's still doing that today. And I am, hopeful that something like that will happen again. Yeah, it will be different, and I think the problem with revival is always the generation that hears about revival and seeks revival. They tend to seek it the way it happened in a previous generation, and I think that's the mistake that gets made, because it's not going to be the way it was back then. It's going to be different. There'll be some similarities. Obviously,
it's still the Spirit of God. It's the Word, but
but it's just going to be a different thing. So I look, and I have a lot of friends who come out of the gang world, Latino guys, and man, I see like a revival happening with those guys. I know a ton of guys who, they've done 15 to 25 to 40 years in prison, and now they're serving Jesus, and it's like, well, that's pretty.
He's always reviving hearts.
That's powerful stuff right there. So and even just. I travel a lot. I go to different places around the world. Just in South America, I see what's happening in a place like Lima, Peru. And man, it's like, Lord, you're moving.
There's an awakening.
God is moving, And of course, we'd love it to be a thing. I pastor a church, and there's plenty of empty seats in our church. Yeah. I'd love to see every one of those seats filled.
All week, always praying, always serving.
Right.
Why wouldn't you? Yeah.
And so that's something, but I'm convinced that's something only God can do. And so we just do what we know to do. We keep doing what God's called us to do. And then we just trust him to do the thing that only he can do.
Yeah, and I say that because, I know the Calvary Chapel bookstores, most pastors I've ever met have all read Why Revival Tarries by Leonard Ravenhill. And the generation before, it was almost that their focus was sitting in an altar, praying God's will, and a holiness and a fasting, because they wanted to serve. They wanted conviction. And I'm saying that because I feel like today sometimes, even, we go downtown and we do that We Gather ministry. So I just invite worshipers, hey, if you want to sing, and, Pastor Brian, if you want to come down, or these guys, we're just going to sing and worship. But that could easily become something where we think, if we get 500 people, enough people are going to think it's revival, then it becomes man-centered. And it's like we talk about Peter going up on the Mount of Transfiguration. They're all there, and he wants to start his Bible study and stay in the holiness moment. And like you said, God's telling him to go back down the mountain to continue the work. Yeah, and all of these ideas about, let's do this, and let's try that. And I'm not putting that down. All of that's fine. But that's not what it is. This is something different. It's something that God does. Amen. That all you really can do is watch. You just stand there, and you're sucked up into it too. But it's something that is so clearly of God. And that's what we long for, to see where people, and it really comes down to coming under the conviction of the Holy Spirit. That's where it starts, right? Jesus said the Holy Spirit's going to convict the world of sin, righteousness, and judgment. When I pray, I always pray, Lord, convict the world of sin. That's what people need to know, that they're sinners, not, and that's going to happen differently for every person. I just knew I was a sinner.
And it wasn't because somebody was preaching to me, telling me I was a sinner. I knew it. I knew it myself. He convicted me,
Wasn't one of those hippies, thankfully.
No, I did. Those guys, I didn't want to hear what they said. But, I knew inside that, no, I am a sinner and I need something. I didn't know exactly what that was. And that's what we need to see again. And like I said, I do think we're seeing it, but, Lord, do it again in a great way,
Well, even your point about you continue seeing it, I didn't realize this was happening, when Pastor Jared, the evangelist pastor at your church, who I'm good friends with as well, we were doing a night of evangelism. I didn't even realize I was saying it. I went up there and there was a couple hundred people and I was sharing the second half of it, and I just said, man, can you imagine if Calvary Chapel wasn't here? And we don't worship, a move or a building or anyone, but I said, what would have even been in Orange County?
Yeah.
Because there was solid teaching. Yeah. Most of the places I go, like I'm saying, these people have been evangelistically sent out.
Yeah.
And as I was saying, what would have been here? Would it have been overly spiritual? Would it have been radically weird of faith? Would it have got all funky like Christian Science, Jehovah's Witness? And someone actually said, because I'm kind of open when I'm preaching, about to start, they said, or would there have been nothing?
Yeah.
So when you think of it, even for Drew and Isaac sitting here, you can almost gauge within California, what kind of, my friend Jamie, Pastor Jamie, who's in Costa Rica, it's a Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
So when I go over there a couple times a year to visit him, I know what has been birthed through the Spirit that time, and it's a hunger for the Word and the Spirit's move.
And I think there would have been nothing. Yeah. that to me is, because there was nothing before.
Yeah, there wasn't. That's, I was
when I was in high school, when I was in 10th grade, that would have been 1973. There was that's when the Jesus thing was happening.
73.
Yeah, but it was still, it hadn't permeated the culture like it has now, or it did later. So there were plenty of years where I just didn't know anything about Jesus. People assume in America there was a Christian culture and everybody. I actually read this book recently, and the guy was saying, back in I don't remember the dates he gave, the 1960s or whatever. He said this is what everybody in America would have kind of understood and kind of believed it just in a general sense. And I read that list and I thought I did not know or believe one of those.
Nor
things.
Your friends.
No, none of my friends. None of us. No, we didn't know. I never knew that. I knew about Jesus, obviously. I was raised in Roman Catholicism, but I never heard once that you could be born again and have a personal relationship with God, the God who made you, that God has a plan for your life. I never heard that.
Yeah, and I didn't until I was 24 living here, and so that's still that call to...
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Which, I don't want to sit there talking about revival so much, but I do remember a good friend of mine in Alabama saying, look, there was a certain gentleman that came through here who had lost his daughter, and he got such a hunger for God that he would go and preach, and there was just this innocence and this truth, and his point was to say, but here we are 20 years later, and you're almost trying to create back to your point, because from what I've heard is a lot of these revivals that took place, the gentleman that it came through, or even the lady at the time, within a year or two, they were struggling with depression and anxiety because they wanted to see God move that exact same way. Yeah. And now it's time to actually plant churches, disciple some people, help the homeless, not just sit there and receive. Yeah, and I think, there are those seasons where God just does this extraordinary thing. And then things just sort of calm down, and then you do the work. That's what we do now, right? We faithfully teach the scriptures. We still go out and we do evangelism, and we disciple, and we plant churches, and we do all of that. And we're going to keep doing that. Yeah. But it would sure be nice if just one day all of a sudden there was this massive downpour I know. From heaven. And everyone's just in the street with the Bible, like, we don't know what we're doing, but he's leading us this way. Yeah. But, I've seen so many times, and you can understand this, Brian, from the UK context too. There were so many times when I was living in London, there was all of this talk like, there's the greatest revival ever that's going to come. The Queen's going to get saved, and all the members of Parliament and the taxi drivers, everybody's going to, and but it was like man-made. It was like, we're going to make this happen. Yeah. And it's like, well, it didn't happen. And they've been, was it the Sex Pistols who sang God Save the Queen? They've been saying it for so long. Hopefully hopefully that's prophetic. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if they had the same thing in mind.
they definitely didn't. They were being more rebellious and political. So
I used to sing Sex Pistols songs in my band. So yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Okay, well, I got a couple guitars around, so no, we won't.
Yeah, I kind of moved away from that, though.
But just saying all that, so you're now saved, obviously you're married, all this goes on, and really the biggest changes with, you were Brian Brodersen, who would consistently teach every Wednesday night and serving locally in the church, and just a lot of travel with you and your family. And so suddenly, with the passing of Pastor Chuck, your father-in-law, you inherit this church and this ministry.
Yeah.
Was there something, because I'm curious about this, but did you feel God shift something in you? How did you navigate the season of Papa Chuck, who was kind of the Calvary Chapel, the guy that birthed the movement, the Holy Spirit through him? Yeah. Did you feel God doing something specific in you, change your focus, or? Well,
I pastored. I pastored for 17 years. So I started when I became a Christian. It was not too long after that I met my wife, Cheryl, and she's Chuck's daughter.
Yep.
And we got married, and then Pastor Chuck asked me to come on and do an internship at the church to train. So I did 3 years of training with him at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and then I left. And for 17 years, I was gone. So I pastored 2 churches in 17 years.
Took Cheryl with you?
Yeah, Cheryl and my kids, And we lived in North County, North San Diego County, and for 13 years I pastored Calvary Chapel Vista.
Wow.
There. And then after 13 years of pastoring there, I went to the UK and planted a church in London and pastored that church for 4 years. So then when I came back to California and to Costa Mesa with the intent of transitioning into the pastoral leadership with Pastor Chuck. But from the late 80s, I had gotten involved in international church planting.
Yeah.
And so I was a bit conflicted because I was trying to figure out because Pastor Chuck was the very stationary pastor,
I open the word, I read.
And he was always there, so he was there. There's 52 weeks in the year. Chuck was there 50 weeks a year, 50 Sundays.
No, I've had friends say, look, we left a Calvary at this time and we fell into rebellion. And when we came back 6 years later, we were at this part in the Bible. And it was like, you could have just chimed in again and you're right there, But that's what God called that man too.
Exactly. Yeah. And so he did that. So I looked at and I thought, okay, I know God's given me this more sort of worldwide kind of thing. How do these two things fit together?
Yeah.
And so I'm actually living that out as we speak. I'm living out how it fits together, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Still now navigating.
Still navigating it to some extent, I travel maybe a little more than I want to, but I feel out of necessity that I do it. And the Lord's done a great job in, stabilizing the ministry here in the church here.
I mean, obviously friends with Sarah over there, Colin, Nicola, all the people. I mean, you're around great people. So even talking earlier.
You got a great team,
It is all these under Christ, but it isn't like, here's Calvary. Calvary's just begun so global that now you can go almost anywhere and encounter a church. So it is still pastoring, but you get to travel and do missions.
And there's great opportunities and, need for encouragement. The further people are away from a place where they feel like there's some stability in a place that they can get encouragement, they just feel that disconnect. So for me to go, that helps bridge that gap.
Be personal, ask the questions, hang out. Even just talking about the Jesus movement now, I mean, and love song and that, it's great because people probably who are even Calvary pastors go, okay, I didn't really know Brian's perspective on that. So, and that was kind of leading me to this other point that I guess I kind of took for granted, because when I came here as a skater, probably the only church I heard about was a Calvary, and a gentleman called Sean would hand me a Bible with a harvest sticker on at the time, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is, way before I was a believer, so God was tinkering away at me. Yeah. But I've actually took for granted just how evangelistic Calvary is, because I'm saying, it's almost embedded into Calvary pastors. And this I'm saying to any kind of ministries or leaders or friends of mine who actually have a hard time. Yeah. People like myself or like these guys, I wish I could go sit with my pastor and explain the vision for, action sports or skateboarding or surf or snow. Yeah. And it's sometimes so far removed. Yeah. How has Calvary always just been that evangelist?
Yeah, it's just part of the DNA.
It's that
Calvary.
Move again, I guess.
Again, I think in some ways because we all got saved in sort of just a radical way. Mm-hmm. And I mean, nobody said okay, now you're saved, take this evangelism course and now go out and do it. We just did it. You just went and did,
You mean you were just Christians?
Yeah.
There's water there.
Yeah.
You mean
water,
you were just Christians in the... So you just got saved.
And so I think it is part of the Calvary DNA, and it's recognized by a lot of other evangelicals. They recognize there's something with Calvary.
Yeah. So you're saying, so Calvary, it wasn't like God said, hey, someone need to take a course or do something. You guys just got saved, and actually you saw the Great Commission and you just went with it.
Yeah. I mean, it was just what you did. And again, that's part of that, like I was saying earlier, it was just part of that work of God, where it was just very natural. You just went, you got saved. Like I said, I got saved. My friend and I got saved. We looked at each other and said, none of our friends are saved. Let's do what we can do. We would take a person and we would pray for that person. We'd say, okay, let's pray for so-and-so. We'd pray for that person for a week, and then we'd invite them to a Bible study, and they'd get saved.
Wow.
And we just kept doing that, and it was like a chain reaction. It just...
Well, everyone listening is like, oh yeah, that sounds biblical. And it's like...
It's pretty simple, I mean, it wasn't complicated. It was...
I've got to give them this book and do this and do that, and that's great, or invite them to this, but you prayed. And I say this because to anyone listening, guys, when I was at the top of my skate career, divorced and over it, came to faith, right away it was like Calvary was doing stuff, Franklin Graham was doing stuff. I was telling you earlier, I'm in a big conference thing with Luis Palau's, NGA, where they're bringing all their pastors and kind of ministers and people around the world and saying, look guys, we don't want you to see action sports as like the stepchild. Like Paul went to Mars Hill. He went wherever he was. He said, become all things to all men. So within your churches, pastors, please understand those skaters, whether it's the housewife, whether it's the skater, whether it's the guy who's going to be a pastor, reach out to them where they are. Listen, from the west to the east, skateboarding and music, they say, is the biggest cultural influence. They're saying it influences surfing now and snowboarding. So if you get these fired up skaters and listen, I say that because they've estimated that between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. is when most kids have sex for the first time, they get high for the first time, and they get addicted to pornography. Because why? Dad's at work, they're hanging out with their girlfriend, they have nothing to do. So picture being in one of these big churches with some property, and you hire the youth pastor and say, hey, let's put some kind of skate course out there. Bring some pizza, bring some, something to drink, just hang out, begin to engage them. We don't only save them on the Sunday or the Wednesday night, which is absolutely essential. I need to be in church. When I travel and it's me preaching, I can't wait to get home and sit in those and just hear my pastor or whoever, preaching. But for those pastors out there, God... Creation Fest, you have a massive skate park. Even the Bible Project, which I'm sure you affirm that's on YouTube. That's Phil Mackey, a guy who got saved in skate church. I mean, look what God is doing. And you're here earlier boasting, about what God's doing in Josh and with Beaver Fleming, even yourself ministering to Gator years ago. Wow. I mean, this is...
And the thing that I think, again, it was just that there wasn't... And this is, I think, one of the beautiful things that God did through Calvary, is he kind of broke down the churchiness of things. Now, so like I said, I mean, I've been in Catholic church before my conversion. The only other times I was in any churches, I went to a couple of Pentecostal churches, literally went there for the humor of it all, just to laugh. My friends and I, the people would go crazy speaking
Before
in tongues.
You were at Calvary?
When I was really young. And, we'd run out of there just dying laughing at them. And these people
Did no one interpret?
No, there was no interpret.
You didn't just say 1 Corinthians 14?
No, there was none of that.
Okay.
But what happened with the whole Jesus thing was, I think it broke a lot of that churchiness and just took you back to more like what you would read in the New Testament, like what Christians were like.
Because he became personal, because he is a personal Savior.
And they were normal people. They were fishermen, they were tax collectors, they were all of those things. And that churchy kind of thing that developed over however long a period of time, that kind of all broke down. So for us, it was like skating, surfing, music. That's all the stuff we did. So now we could just channel it toward Jesus.
Because people, and you've probably seen that famous post online where it says those who will not inherit the kingdom, and it lists like vegetarians, skateboarders, blah, 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 blah. And people that don't know that read that and think it's true. And it's like, no, it's farthest from the truth, because who did Jesus pick? he picked the most unlikely and the rest of it. So,
Yeah.
and I do want to, just because you must have walked through things that I might not even get to walk through in my life. I've said to you, I do not feel called to be a lead or plan. I'll go in there and get as sweaty as I can be with anyone save. However, but I'd say this to say, pastoring in itself, just for those who are part of a church or even pastors, pastoring can be daunting. It can be draining. It can be challenging. So I guess I would ask you, with sitting in a room with 50 or so young men, with women who are trying to figure out who they are. You've got years and years of wisdom now, planning many churches, being raised about many great leaders. Yeah. What advice would you give them? Yeah.
Well, I would really zero in on just the whole issue of calling, because I really believe, firmly in that. That's kind of been my life story, is just trying to discern God's call and follow that call. Mm-hmm. So, people ask me sometimes, like, well, how did you get into the ministry? How did you become a pastor? And I would often say, I didn't necessarily try to do that. What I did do, though, is I intentionally sought to serve God. And then it just unfolded in a certain way, So I just did what was in front of me. Yeah. So when I got saved and I was working in the construction world, I just tried, to the best of my ability with my buddies on the construction site, just to be a witness. And then I left there and I went back into the surf world, and I was managing a surf shop. And I thought, okay, here I have an opportunity to see people all day long, and I have an opportunity to see guys that I've known for years. Yeah. And so I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. And so, my managing the surf shop was actually my pulpit.
Yeah. And it is. That's the platform. That's the marketplace ministry.
Yeah. And that's what God gave me. And then the Lord opened the door for me to actually, the whole time I was involved in my church, I was plugged in, I was doing what I could here and there, helping out. But then a door opened, to actually come on and get some training and do more specific type of, pastoral type of ministry. Yeah. And then I did that for a few years. And then when I was 26 years old, that's when I began to pastor my first church. Mm-hmm. And so it was all this journey, that God put me on. So when I talk to anybody today, that's where I want to start with them. What and some people say, I don't have a clue what God's called me to do. And then I would ask, well, what do you want to do? What's your desire? What do you feel inclined to do? And start working with that and with the opportunities that are right in front of you, because God doesn't show you the whole thing at once, right?
He doesn't take you from a surf shop to a pastor or to planning 50 churches.
And he doesn't even necessarily show you like, okay, this is what it's going to be. But my experience has been, he's given me over the years, he's given me little senses of like, this is going to happen, and you're going to go here, and this, you're going to do that. And you're kind of like, wow, I don't know. It's sort of like you're in a maze. Yeah. But then as you just keep walking, I was just sharing with some leaders a couple of weeks ago. I was in New York City, and we had about 30 guys together. And I said, guys, this is the thing God's showed me this past year. Every year it's like the Lord gives me sort of a vision or a theme. And I said, this is what the Lord showed me this last year, that for the past almost 30 years, we have been walking, and this has a lot to do with the whole global mission and all of that. Yeah. We've been walking forward, putting one foot in front of the other, walking into this barrenness. And then now, 30 years later, we look behind us and there's all these lush, fruitful fields. Yeah. But when we were walking in it, we couldn't see that.
It's till the ground. God gives the increase.
You're just putting your one foot in front of the other. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing, where you're going. Am I even supposed to be here? There's a mystery, right? And there's a life of faith, and you don't always figure it out, but you try to follow. You just try to follow the thread the Lord has put there,
For these young leaders who are like, here's where I'm stepping, what do I do?
Yeah. And it's a long, as Eugene Peterson said, it's a long obedience in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And I want to encourage people, because there's a lot of impatience just in the culture, right? Everybody wants success overnight. And,
well, they want to see fruit right away. Yeah. But a seed has to go down to the ground where it's dark and damp. It's watered. Yeah. You're Eugene Peterson. If you guys are getting a book, get the book, The Pastor. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's amazing.
Yeah. And that's right. And fruit isn't always what we think it is. Because we think of fruit like, oh yeah, there's a lot of things happening, and I got more Instagram followers than I ever had. Yeah. And I'm my profile is
I won this, or she said yes. And no.
that's not necessarily fruit. Fruit is essentially the character of Christ being formed in the individual life. I mean, Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. Okay, so what's the fruit that's going to come? Well, the fruit is going to be the life of Christ. So, and that's a lifelong journey.
It ripens over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fruit of the Spirit, he made the deposit, now he's in us. And so for these guys who are doing that and now they're almost burned out going, okay, I checked into this podcast with these two Brians, they're burned out. I mean, I like the idea of looking back and saying, look what's there, but...
Yeah, and slow down and pace yourself, and it all, this, Brian. It all goes back to you got to be personally connected. I mean, Jesus said it right there. I just mentioned it. He's the vine.
Yeah,
we are the branches. He said, apart from me, you could do nothing.
John 15:5.
So we can get out there on our own. We think I'm serving God. This is what I'm doing, and then you find out, well, I don't know if I feel like I'm kind of cut off from the vine here.
Yeah,
and you might be because maybe you took a turn and you went in a direction that God wasn't necessarily leading, but it looked like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
It's okay. Just recognize it, stop, back up, and get reconnected and, see what the Lord wants to do.
And even for those, who may not be pastors, may not be in ministry, obviously you just start serving where you are and He's faithful with the little, God will give increase, he'll be faithful with the much. But for those who are part of the church, one of the things I find myself having to encourage people a lot is not to forsake gathering together.
Yeah.
You might be going somewhere right now and we're friends, maybe we don't know each other, maybe we're friends online. You're mad at your pastor, you're mad at what someone said, but there's a reason Hebrews says don't forsake gathering together. So as to stir up love. Yeah,
and that's one of the big ripoffs that the devil, pulls on people.
Getting mad at someone.
Yeah, getting mad, getting bitter. Look, you're going to get hurt throughout the Christian life. People are going to stab you in the back. People are going to cheat you. People are going to be unfaithful. That is reality. And if you got to just learn to live with it. And you got to forgive and you got to keep moving on because like Paul says, don't give the devil a foothold in your life. And how do you do that? Through bitterness and unforgiveness. And the devil will stop you in your tracks. And then, the church, everybody's a hypocrite. I'm not going to go to the church anymore. And then pretty soon you're sidelined and then you're withering up and you're getting picked off by the enemy, right? I mean, that's the way it works.
I think it was Pastor Chuck who used to say, well, if you think the church are a bunch of hypocrites, what do you think hell's going to be like if you don't know the Lord? Everyone. I mean, we're all hypocrites, but the goal is we're not trying to live sinfully or live in the same path. It's trying to ripen. So,
and so, man, the church is God's thing that he has established for family life, for community, for love, for friendships. I think of all of the people, and I've been stabbed in the back, I've been lied about, I've had all kinds of those things happen to me over the years. But I also have some of the greatest relationships I could even imagine in this life. And I know that had I never met Christ, I never would have had these relationships. I mean, it's just amazing.
As you build that community, that's what we're made for. And whether it's gang life, whether it's skating with its own religion or jiu-jitsu, God has made us to be a community and a flock. And there is a different grace and a love. And guys, I'm just harping on this because I really want those who might be new to the faith or very bitter, walking in your church is full of grace. Having elders and leaders where the struggles you can go and humbly submit yourselves and say, Lord, help us reconcile. Because even a couple of verses, I remember seeing John Piper years ago speak, I think, and Rick Warren introed him, and he read this verse in Hebrews 13:7 where he just said, remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God, so who's preaching and speaking into you and loving you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. So that's a challenge to us to live a certain way. Consider them, but then he says to us as believers for the flock, Hebrews 13:17, learning to obey them, that they may have rule. Doesn't mean just submit to whatever they say, but trust and submit yourselves, for they're meant to watch out for your souls. That means they should love you. They should going to give account one day, and so they may do it with joy, not with grief, for this is unprofitable for you. Meaning, if I'm at Calvary Chapel, I'm submitted to the vision until I see something that's off. I'm trying to live this thing out. So many of my friends move somewhere or get offended and they're out in the darkness mad at God. And I truly believe that God calls you to a church.
Yeah.
I feel called to my home church. As soon as I feel called somewhere else, I would go sit with my pastor or an elder and say, hey, here's where the Lord's leading me. So
and just think of it in the analogy of a family, which of course it is a family. I mean, how many family feuds have you had with your parents, with your siblings?
Just my kids today.
Your kids,
getting
your
them
wife.
out the house.
But hey, you're still a family, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, somebody's got to say, I'm sorry, and there's got to be forgiveness, and you got to move on. And you have to do the same thing in the larger context of the church. And because that's where the life is, that's where all of those things that people are longing for, God has a plan for those things to be fulfilled in that context.
Yeah.
The enemy wants to rip you off and pull you out of that, and you got to just resist that. And you got to humble yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's hard.
The hardest thing in the world is to admit, like, hey, maybe I was wrong about this.
Yeah.
Or more specifically, I was wrong about this. But you got to do it. You have to do it. I've had many times over the years where I've had to just look at somebody and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and please forgive me. And man, it's okay. That's what Jesus does. He gives us the power to forgive, and then you can go on.
And I can't say it enough. I joke with my pastor, I don't envy your role. If you put me in the pulpit every week for 4 weeks, how many people are going to get mad at something I say or my gestures or something I didn't do? I get in trouble more now for things I don't do, I've found, because we want everyone else to be so perfect, but not ourselves. I get it.
Yeah.
But a couple of questions too that came up, because I know you've got to run out of here in a little while, but I'm going to probably get in trouble for this one, but with the pastor's perspective reference, if Don Stewart were here now, where would he say we are on the scale of the end times, or what?
Well, I was just with Don a couple of hours ago, and he said, see you later. I'm going to Canada to do a prophecy conference.
Man.
So he's on his way up. But Don, the thing I appreciate about Don is he's an avid prophecy guy, but he's also smart enough to know that we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know when the Lord's going to come back. I mean, honestly, when I became a Christian 40 years ago, I thought the Lord was coming back within a few months. And yet, here we are, we're still here. And so, it's hard for me to believe that it's 100 years out in the future or even 50 years, but I don't know, could be 10, could be 20.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have a conviction about is, God's doing a work all around the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like, well, there's still a lot of work to do. So Lord, if you're going to delay or whatever it is, you're not delaying, when you're coming, but that's okay, because we got plenty to do until you get here. So I'm thankful that Jesus is coming. If he comes tomorrow, I'm thrilled, but I don't know when he's going to come. So I'm going to keep doing everything he's let me do.
And that's like my pastor says. He goes, Brian, you're the end times guy, so study it and talk about it and enjoy it. I actually have a video on my phone that years ago John Piper had sent me saying, Brian, I'm going to go to my grave not having an eschatology on Daniel 9, 24, 27, because some people like yourself, you're focused on the church and you'll preach through it.
Yeah.
But then someone like Don is the guy that if something happens, we're going to call Don and say, well, we're going to get Don on the show and have an end time session.
Yeah.
Matthew Robinson, who you know from Media Gratia, who did the Martin Lloyd-Jones movie collection, says, what was it about Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones that inspired you or encouraged you the most?
Yeah. Man, Lloyd-Jones was, I had a serious idolatry problem with Lloyd-Jones for years. I wanted to be Lloyd-Jones, but, didn't have the brain capacity. I
don't think many people
figured that out at a certain point. Yeah. But, the thing I really loved about MLJ is he was just a straight shooter. He was a guy who was just going to open up the text and he was going to plow through the books of the Bible. And, in the day and age that he was living in, all the pressures to kind of conform and be something else, he was just a steady guy.
Yeah.
Like, no, this is the word and the spirit are what matter. And that's what I'm going to stick with, So I really appreciated that with him. And, I got to have the privilege of, when I pastored in London, my church, which was located in Westminster City School, was literally, I could throw a rock and hit Westminster Chapel from where I was. And I ended up being able to pastor some of the people that had been under Lloyd-Jones ministry.
That were in what, 70 or 80s? Or?
Yeah. Older family. Clifford and Mary would come to mind for the most part. They were just this beautiful, precious couple that had spent their young lives at Westminster Chapel with Lloyd-Jones. And then I became their pastor, and I thought, wow, this is like the greatest thing that ever happened. I got to pastor the same people.
You had to deal with your idolatry then, and then you were like, could you ask them how you were doing compared to him? And did they answer you?
Well, they actually actually, they really liked my preaching. They were they were very gracious. But, I certainly came to a point where I realized, okay, this is good. I mean, you want to have models. You want to have people that inspire you. But obviously, he was who he was, and I was not him. So, it was a season. You go.
Was he a physician or a brain doctor?
He was a physician originally, yeah. When he was 25 years old, he was the assistant physician to the royal family.
So, and then God called him to preach, and soon there was thousands showing up.
Yeah, well, he went back to Wales. That was, his birth land. He had grown up in London, but then he went back to Wales, and there in Port Talbot, there was like a revival that took place through the church that he was preaching at there.
Wow.
And, historians say that it was basically the preaching of Lloyd Jones that prevented Wales from going communist.
Wow.
And so it was just the impact that he had there. And then, later he would come to Westminster Chapel in London, and he would spend 30 years there. And, so.
And I'm just saying that because his movie is on Amazon Prime, Logic on Fire. Yeah. I know you got it out to all the Calvary chapels. Yeah. I'm so thankful that, Matthew and the Media Gratia crew got this thing out. Yeah. It's very motivating. Yeah.
I was amazed when I, saw that it came out. Yeah. And I saw it. And I've read probably everything on Lloyd Jones from Ian Murray, from Catherwoods, from all of the different people that have written. Plus, I've read most of his own material.
Yeah. So Matthew, to answer your question, it was pretty much idolatry. No. It was just his life and that great example. And I'm thankful all these guys are from England. And then I guess Andy McHugh, who you may have met over at Creation Fest, he's there a lot. Mm-hmm. He said, can we truly and completely forgive someone? Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
And I know the basis for Andy's question.
I do too.
It's a serious issue.
Yeah.
And only through the help and the grace of God. Mm-hmm. And I don't think in any way God says, you better forgive them. I think the Lord says, bring it to me and I will help you to deal with that.
And go mourn with him, lament with him, a word we don't use too much in the West anymore, and say, God, why did this happen?
Yeah.
The world's fallen. Yeah. There's a cursed, sinful nature. We're wrestling not with flesh and blood, but... Yeah.
And in the end, there are those kinds of things like Andy went through that you just have to, there's a point where you just have to say, okay, God, I will never understand this, but I'm just going to trust you.
Your closure's in Jesus. And Andy, I've only met you a couple of times, but we talk online a lot. We love you and we're praying for you. And
Andy's a great brother. He's been a real blessing at the festival over the years. Yeah.
And then, Liverpool or Everton? You can't say Man United, right? Who's your favorite soccer team?
No. Actually, I kind of lean toward Liverpool because I thought, this is my heritage. I might as well go with it. My great-great-grandfather, Cecil Haig.
Okay. And then for me, more personally, as a dad, how did you raise all these kids? And now you're on the grandkids. As a guy like me who pastors and travels, and I don't go a lot. I don't want my kids to resent God because I'm gone so much. You get to take your family with you. Yeah. But what would you tell these young dads in ministry or just anything?
Well, and I see what you're doing, Brian, and I really think you're doing the right thing. You're involving your kids in your life. It's not like you got your life and your ministry and then you got your family and your kids over there. And we did that. We were a ministry family. Yeah. We were all together. We were a team. And, my oldest son, Char, when he was 7 years old, I was dragging him off to Eastern Europe to do outreaches with me.
And he's pastoring now.
And now, he's 36 years old. He's pastoring his own church. He's doing great. And but we kind of just did that with our family. When we went to the UK, we went as a family. Yeah. And we lived there and we ministered there together as a family. So we've always just been a family who's serving Jesus together. Yeah. And I would say, put your family first. The church belongs to Jesus, and it's his business. He's going to take care of it. He doesn't need you to save the church or the world. But he does want you to be faithful to your wife and faithful to your kids, to represent him and to love them. And there's to me, that is number one priority, has been for decades. I think, man, if I saved the whole world and lost one of my kids because of negligence or whatever, I would just be... Which some of these old revivalists who went across those nations... Some of them did do that,
They went for 6 months with their family through jungle where they dehydrated and died, and we celebrate them, but that wasn't always loving.
Some of it wasn't,
It wasn't very.
Yeah, it wasn't. I had this moment so many years ago. It's funny that I can even remember it because I was in my early 20s, and I remember this very clear moment where I remember exactly where I was standing, and the Lord just gave me the order. It's like, okay, here's the order. I'm first, your family second, and the church is third.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I got it.
Because if you can't take care of your own home, how can you? And not to say that everyone's marriage is perfect, because you're going to wrestle, but you want to live above that reproach. You want to live into that standard, loving, repenting. And
I mean, the reality is, we're two people or we're four people or however many we end up with a family. We're all different individual human beings who love each other, but also have our own wills and our own wishes. And sometimes that creates a bit of a conflict. But,
our sin nature at times.
By God's grace, we get through it.
Well, we're right on for you, right on time. So could I just, first of all, how do people just get a hold of you? How do they follow you, connect with you, book-wise?
Well, I'm on Instagram at, I think, what is my Instagram? It's B. Brodersen. B. Brodersen. S-E-N.
You're worse than me.
And then my Twitter is Brian Brodersen.
Okay.
You can follow me on Twitter. I have a Facebook, both a personal and a public page. I don't do anything on my Facebook page, so that's not a good place. Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, of course, that's my home base. That's the church I pastor. CalvaryChapel.com is another venue, and tool for
go
us
get a hold, see what you're doing. And guys, go over there, check this stuff out. I mean, Pastor Brian's all over the world. I want men like him on here, women like this on here, because for reasons that we should be encouraged. Hear about God's wrestling with us, the blessings he's bestowing as he leads us, the struggles we go through. So I guess even in closing, could you just pray for anyone that's listening, where they are in their walk, up or down, good or bad, just whatever, and just what you would say to all of us.
Lord, we do pray, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here with these guys tonight and to just have this chat. And Lord, I want to pray, first of all, for anybody who hears this, who's maybe they have drifted away. Maybe their hearts become hard. Maybe they become disillusioned. Maybe they've been hurt or something like that. Lord, I pray that you'd show them that you're not any of those things, Lord, that they would be able to look beyond the hurt or the person that hurt them, and to see that there's a loving Savior who knows best what we need in our lives. And I pray that you'd help them, Lord, just to turn to you, Lord. Lord, anybody that happens to listen to this that maybe hasn't ever really made a personal commitment to you, Lord, that you would show them what a great and wonderful thing it is to be a follower of Christ, Lord, that's what they were made for. And you love them so much that you died and rose again to give them that opportunity to be in that relationship. Help them to make that connection. And Lord, for those finally that are seeking to serve you and wanting to just know your will, help them, Lord, to seek that, because you said, seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened. And Lord, help them to seek you with the expectation that you're going to show them your will and your way. And bless this podcast, bless the future episodes, and Brian and his family and all these guys here. And Lord, we thank you above all that we got saved by you, Lord, that you sought us out and you brought us to yourself. And we praise you for that. Amen.
Thanks for being on with us, Pastor Brian. Good to see you. Guys, stick around. I'm going to have a song coming up in a moment from my buddy Josh Harmony. This is the Foolishness podcast. Why? For the message of the cross is foolishness to those that are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. Go over to briansumner.net. Check out what we're doing with missions, marriages, and ministry. Thanks for sharing, getting this word out. We love you guys. God bless. Talk to you soon. Amen.
Sometimes when I wake and you seem so far away, when the future looks so dark, I can't find the words to pray. When life is like a stormy sea that tosses to and fro, may that word ever be a ballast for my soul. Oh, the stars, they shine their brightest in the darkness of night. And if it be that pain birth beauty to my Lord's delight, then Father, let your providence remain. 'Cause 'cause I know what I am, held to this life, prone to make another mistake on down the line, prone to make another mistake on down the line. My body is in pain, and my soul, it feels the weight. I fear I've trusted in my flesh, and I'm feeling so ashamed. If my foolishness of will could keep your sovereignty at bay, then my ship would lose its course, I would never find my way. All the stars, they shine their brightest in the darkness of night, and if it be that pain with beauty to my Lord's delight, then Father, let your providence remain. So won't you take this broken heart and make it pure, pure in your sight, pure in your light, forevermore, pure in your sight, pure in your light, forevermore.
This has been brought to you by the One Story Podcast.
Tonight.